Alright, so here we go. We're just going to make a quick little tier list for the most recent patch. Starting off with Achilles A+. He's a solid soul laner that just gets the job done, to be honest. His capability to just box out opponents in lane is pretty much uncontested besides like Arthur. His Glad Shield procs are really good because of his 2 combined with them. Makes him heal a lot. And plus the fact that his execute is not only super strong because it can pretty much make it so that a tank only has 70% of their HP pool, but it's also CC immune dash that can get him out of situations as well as resets if you hit an opponent. Yeah, he's all around really strong. Agni, definitely the second best mage in the game. Just really has no weakness aside from his subpar pre-level 5 to as well as his lack of CC immunity. Outside of that, he has self setup. He doesn't even need setup to begin with, to be honest, though. He's super safe because of his dash. He does a lot of damage, and in general is one of the best mages in the game because of it. Ama Zinkob is definitely like A+. I'd say that this character definitely has that early game presence that almost no other hunter can match because of his clear. He fills a similar role to Izanami did in the years prior because of his clear. The only difference is his boxing potential is also absurdly strong because of his hives and his stinger. The biggest issue is his lack of like a dash or anything of that nature. He's super easy to lock down because he has no CC immunity and pretty much requires a team to peel for him. On that note, Opwash has the same flaws as AMC, but also has the same or similar benefits where he has a shit ton of damage and a lot of area denial. Compared to any other mage, he probably has the best area denial in the game. Empty the Crypts is just so strong to keep an area under lockdown for his team, whether that be a Phoenix, Tower, FG Pit, whatever. It's really hard to siege into an Opwash because of it. You have to focus him in the fight, but even then his Crypts go on after he dies, so as long as he gets the Crypts off, he's done his job. But again, similar to AMC, he has no mobility. Honor, I think is pretty strong. He fills a similar boxing niche when it comes to AMC. He has a lot less clear, but has a lot more survivability in return. I feel like him and AMC are very similar characters. His ult's on a 75-second cooldown and gives him CC immunity for like 1.5 to 2 seconds, which is really strong. Because of this, it's harder for him to get locked down. His pillar provides some form of area lockdown because of the slow that it can also translate to increased damage if they walk into it and get hit by him. It's honestly a really underrated ability, one of the best abilities in the game for a hunter. What else? His leap is slow, but aggressively he can do a lot with it. If he's ahead, he's a threat. Amaterasu has the ability to flex into both support and solo. Does have lacking pressure in solo, so I don't think she's that popular in that role right now. I think that overall the character has some potential though, and definitely can be played in support and solo. It's just that if you don't get the pressure, it's kind of hard for you to win in either of those roles. But next patch, pressure is less important in duo, so her aura combined with her 75-second ultimate might make her better. We'll have to see. Next on the list is Anubis. Anubis is pretty bad. I really don't see why you'd ever pick this character. Anti-heal is quite strong right now. Like, you can just build it on any character. Like, any form of anti-heal is just good. It doesn't really matter. It could be a Divine Ruin. It could be a Brawler's. They're not even hard to, like, apply either most of the time. So, really just no reason to pick this character. He just sits. He's a sitting duck. And, like, he has a lot of damage similar to Opwash or Zeus or something like that. But compared to those mages, he has a lot less AoE damage, so he's not damaging an entire team. He's only damaging 1 to 2 players, which is a big thing. I think that's why he's way worse than, like, a Zeus or an Opwash. Next on the list is going to be Ao Kuang. I think Ao Kuang is pretty strong right now. Being able to execute a tank is probably the biggest, like, benefit that he has. His early game is not the best, granted, but if he can get the ball rolling with a couple execute on us, whether it be the solo lane or the support, I think he becomes really powerful because just having only 70% of your HP as a support is just hard in and of itself, but then it's also an execute that's unmissable. Really can't do much about it until you get like your itemization, whether that be bubble or mantle. Mantle really fucks with him, so he might not be S, but for now I'll keep him there. Aphrodite, we'll just put her in B. I don't know. She's not that good because she doesn't get pressure. You can't really play her in support, solo, or mid. For relatively the same reason, low pressure, way too low, even for like future metas. Like if low pressure supports start becoming more viable because of the spirit minion, Aphra is still too low pressure. Like even a Geb could out pressure her in that sense. She's also fairly easy to kill. She has no mobility as a healer. She also has that problem where her early game, just in general, like not even pressure wise, just everything else about her kit, like she has very low CC. Her healing doesn't come online till mid game. At that point, anti-heal is super prevalent. Her ultimate is probably like the biggest thing, and I think if Aokwang, Achilles, and characters like that get super strong, I think she might get a little bit better. We'll have to see though, because Achilles still bullies her out in lane. Maybe she'll become better though. Next is Apollo. Apollo serves a niche. I think it's just that global hunter niche that is nice to have because split pushing can be pretty strong. With the Ichavolt changes next patch, he might be stronger because Ichavolt plus Silver Branch on Apollo. I think he's the one who uses it the best, just because of the way his passive works. His early game is really nice because he doesn't need an ability to get his attack speed, but come mid game, you want an ability that just like gives you increased attack speed, like a Rom Pick Me Up or a Hachiman Banner. So we'll have to see what comes of him in the future, but I think right now he's a solid A tier hunter. Next is Arachne. I think Arachne might be higher up on this tier list. I might be underrating her. I just think she's just like one of those flavor picks for now at the SPL level. On the competitive level, I think that Arachne has her merits, especially when it comes to the invade strat where you send your solo and or your support to like walk at the speed because of the way her webs work. I think her kill potential and farming capabilities is super strong. The biggest thing is that you have to draft like at least 2 other characters, one being like a CC heavy support and another being like a AoE mage to make up for her lack of team fight. I think that if you have that, that's like 2/5 of your team dedicated to making this Arachne pick work, but it's a strong pick if you do. She might be borderline A+. I just want to put her in A because I think she's going to fall off with the coming changes to invades. Next is Ares. Ares is always going to be a threat because of his ultimate, but the big issue I think is just outside of his ultimate, he has no CC. The biggest thing is that he has damage, and I think that because of his high or like good matchup into the Bacchus, he might be better, but Bacchus is getting toned down a bit, so I don't think Ares is like all too valuable. I think that Cerberus just fills his niche, but better. Next is Artemis, on the same tier as Ares, has a lot of good CC and might honestly be better than AMC if she had good clear. The biggest issue is that she lacks good clear. A lot of the good hunters right now have a lot of clear, barring one, which is Shiva Lanke, but he's just stupid broken in other reasons. I think that her 2 is a really strong ability that gives her a lot of attack speed and movement speed. Just really good. Her ult is really strong. Her 1 is mediocre, and her 3 is eh. But she does have a lot of CC in her kit, which is why I'm tempted to put her in A, but we'll have to see how the meta shakes out from there. I think that for now she'll be in B+. Next is RTO. RTO, I think she's A+. She definitely has a lot of good matchups, but she has quite a few bad matchups as well. Dodgy comes to mind when I think of bad. Serb also comes to mind when I think of bad matchups. But the cripple field just shuts down a lot of characters. She has one of the best matchups into both Arthur and Achilles in the soul lane. That's something to keep in mind because of her cripple field. Arthur in particular, half his kit gets shut down because of it, which is really good because that decreases his boxing capabilities quite a bit. She can also flex quite well into both support and solo, so that makes her a pretty strong pick overall. The lack of CC immunity, I think, is what's holding us slightly farther back than other supports. Athena is I would put her in B+, but the taunt and her ultimate will always keep her at least A. I think she's still, I might be overrating her a bit because she only has one CC ability, which is, granted, a taunt, one of the best, if not the best CC abilities in the game. But once you use that CC ability, you really have nothing to like peel for your carries or set up for your carries, whether, depending on which one you need. Say you peel for your carries with your taunt, you don't have any setup for your team. So that means I think she's better in solo, because in solo you can do either, you can just do one, you don't have to do both, because your support will do the other. The biggest issue is just, at that point, you have to kind of like put Athena in solo, which isn't the best Guardian to be going in that role, because she doesn't get too much pressure in that lane. The global rotation, I think, is the biggest thing that's keeping her afloat. The taunt is good, but it's definitely the global pressure in solo lane if she's picked there. A Wheelish. I think a Wheelish could be strong. I think Fenrir in the jungle and or solo might see more prevalence with the coming changes. Because of this, I think a Wheelish definitely is going to have a lot more merit to be picked against the Fenrir in particular. She has good matchups with and against the Bacchus. If she has the Bacchus on her team, Bacchus flops, she just ults them. Against him, Bacchus flops, she just ults him. Same with Fenrir Leap, except not on her team because Fenrir doesn't have a knockup. But you know what I'm saying. The biggest thing with a Wheelish is she requires a couple characters, one or two, maybe the support to have a knockup at least, in order to be somewhat effective. But a lot of the high-end supports, Bacchus, Sylvanas, Geb, they all have knockups, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue, and we might see more of her in the future because she's such a strong early game presence. Next is, in fact, the man himself, Bacchus. I've been talking a lot about him. I think he's still going to be one of the best supports in the future, even after these nerfs. His nerfs are going to hit him quite hard, I think, early game for the pressure, but luckily for him, pressure becomes less valuable in the next patch, I think, because of the Spirit Minions. I'm not sure about this prediction, but I'm 80% certain that this is what's going to happen in the future. But even though his pressure gets decreased a bit and his passive gets toned down, I think he's still going to be super strong because he has the capability to stun you level 1. He still has more pressure than most of the Guardians if you want that. His initiation is insane. They didn't really touch the damage numbers on his ultimate or his flop, so his burst damage is still very prevalent. I think that's the biggest thing, is the fact that they did touch his passive, which is one of the best things in the game for support. So his passive being toned down definitely brings him down from S+ to S, but I think aside from that, he's going to be relatively the same character. He's definitely, I think, still going to be the best support in the game. Next is Bakasur. Bakasur, I don't know. He's A+ S. Character's getting nerfed a lot, so I'm going to put him in A+. The thing is with this character is he's losing a lot of his CC immunity. 0.5 seconds doesn't sound like a whole lot, but that's 0.5 seconds, which is 1 auto if you have 2 attack speed. That means you're getting 1 less auto with CC immunity. Furthermore, you're getting 2 less autos because of the lack of duration. I'm pretty sure it's being reduced by 1 second. I worded that really poorly, but there's a 1 second reduction in duration. So that's 2 autos off. So that's 140 true damage less, plus the CC immunity reduction. That's 140 plus 70, that's like 210 true damage lost because of the duration changes. And I think this is big because the CC immunity on his ult really was what made him threatening, because as a support for the first 1.5 seconds, you couldn't really do much. And about at that point, if he has beads up, he can expend them later, so then he can get the kill. Now there's going to be a lot more gray area as to whether or not he can get the kill. I think he's not going to be like killed. I think the character is still going to be super strong. It's just going to be a lot easier to fight into, especially in the team fight phase. I think his 1v1 is still going to be super strong because true damage is absurd. Next is Baron Samedi. I think Baron Samedi struggles with like a role crisis. Like, where do you really put him? No matter where you put him, I feel like he lacks a bit. Well, if you put him in solo, he lacks pressure. If you put him in support, he lacks some CC. Outside of his ultimate, he really has like a single target route. I think that Baron does have a lot of utility. I think he might be A. I might be underrating him. But just like the way he's played currently, I think he's just you know, B+. He could be A if we see a little bit of small shifts in the meta. If support really doesn't need any pressure, he might be played in support again. We'll have to see. Bastet, really just like a useless, awful character that kind of just doesn't deserve to be picked whatsoever. No reason to pick Bastet over almost any assassin. She's god-awful. No CC in her kit. at least no hard CC in her kit. No late game presence because of her ultimate being completely trash. Her only real form of like presence is early game, and Wheelish is so much better. 10 times, 11, 15 times better than her early game. Pele is 15 times better than her in the early game. There's just no reason to pick the character. Bellona, on the other hand, there's quite a bit of a reason to pick Bellona, especially if Double Hunter, because of Ichabod, becomes more prevalent in the coming patch. Bellona definitely, out of any of the characters in the game, has the easiest disarm to just apply to an opponent. Her boxing in lane isn't bad, especially now that Warrior's Blessing is stronger. She just becomes better because she's an auto attack warrior, so anytime she autos an opponent, she gets protection from her passive. Same with them attacking her. Her Scourge is really good for healing herself up, plus Berserker Shield. Itemization is pretty nice for her right now, and it allows her to just do what she wants in that role. Next is Khepri. Khepri does have the ability to flex into 3 roles technically. I don't think he plays any of those roles well. I think because he can flex though, I can put him in B, but aside from that, nah, I'll keep him in C. He's just useless in all those roles. Like, he really just doesn't do anything. His CC is super close range, so if you're a jungler, you get blown up too hard. I think his only viable role is going to be solo in the coming patch, if at all. But you can just interrupt his tremors with, like, most of the characters. Achilles just stuns him out of it. I guess Bellona can't do much about it, but Arthur has, like, a knock-up. You can just ult him because Arthur's ult is stupid like that. Like, a lot of these high-end solo laners can probably just interrupt him one way or another. If he does become better, it's definitely going to be in the solo lane, though. So, he might be a B-tier character, but I think he's just C because he just doesn't do anything. Camazotz is better best stat because he can heal, she can't. Aside from that, they're relatively, like, they fill the same purpose, do a lot of damage early game, kind of do much of nothing late game. Camazotz does still do a good amount of damage late, and his ultimate's just definitely just flat out better than Bastet's, so we'll put him in B. Cernunnos is like the second best hunter in the game right now, I think. I think the character is broken, or close to it. The Cernunnos has just got everything going for him. He got small changes to his 2, so he clears way better than any other hunter right now, aside from like AMC and whatnot. His ult got buffed because of the slow on his polymorph, so now he has more setup in that sense. He also has more self-peel. I think the big thing, though, that changed was itemization, where the attack speed build became better than the crit build, and Cernunnos is the best user of the attack speed build. Plus, Runeforge became strong, and Cernunnos is the best user for that, too. Ichabod being strong is just going to affect every hunter and just bring them all up, I think. Cernunnos is just looking pretty good right now. Next on the list is Cerberus. I think Cerberus is in the same tier as, like, A+, as Achilles, as Bellona and stuff. He's definitely a high-end support, and as also high-end solo. I think he's, like, an A+ support. I think he's going to be A with the coming patch because pressure is not going to be as important. I think he's definitely, like, an A+ solo laner as well. Being able to flex in both those roles makes him strong. The biggest thing with Cerberus is just that he does a lot of damage and has a good amount of setup as well. Even with that damage, he doesn't, like, sacrifice CC. He still has a 1.8 second stun on his 1, as well as, like, a really strong protection shred, as well as a slow on his 2. His ultimate is really, really good for burning beads and setting up for your team, depending on if the beads are up or down. A little bit telegraphed, that's for sure. Definitely counterable if the opponents have a lot of CC immunity in their kit. But outside of that, if you force a couple abilities, Cerberus can be super strong. The only thing keeping him out of S is, of course, the capability of emitting his ult because it's somewhat telegraphed. But aside from that, I think it's just really strong. Next is Chok. Chok is cool. I don't know where to put him. With the rise of auto attack, assassins and whatnot, I think he might be B+. He might even be A if Double Hunter becomes a thing. This is, of course, predicting that Ichabod is so broken that Double Hunter does become a thing. I don't know if it will, but if it does, Chok will become probably an A-tier character just because of his 3. Late game, his 1 and 2 aren't that good. Like, they don't do much. His 2 gives protections, I guess, if you hit a lot of opponents, but aside from that, like, his ultimate's pretty nice because of the silence knock-up shit. His gives a good amount of disruption. His 3 is good because it just slows down the enemy's DPS if they're auto-attackers. But aside from that, he's alright. He wins lane. Like, you really can't lose lane as a character, so that's pretty good. Next on the list is Chang'e. I think Chang'e suffers from the same things that Baron suffers from, which is just like a lack of role, if that makes sense. Just like a incapability of deciding where to put her. Like, you can put her in solo, but she doesn't have that pressure. You can put her in mid, but like she doesn't have the damage that like an Agni, Merlin, Hera provides. The thing with Chang'e over Baron solo, at least, is that Chang'e is a lot harder to kill. So she might be better in solo. Baron might be better in support. Definitely can look towards them because healing might be a little bit strong. We'll have to see if healing meta ever becomes a thing. These two are definitely the characters to look out for, specifically Chang'e. Next is Cherno. Cherno fills pretty much the same niche as Apollo. Little bit, they have like similar attack speed stims, 75% I think is Cherno's, and then Apollo's is 100%, relatively close, 25% off. Cherno's dash is really good, stall. Cherno's ult is probably better for rotating, but a little worse when it comes to damage. But boxing wise, he's definitely better with his ultimate. Cherno is. They're both like omnipresent threats and can split push and then also rotate to like the FG fight because that's how their ult works. They're also relatively safe. They're not as safe as like a Jingwei or Hachi, but they're still somewhat safe because of their globals. The Cherno's global is definitely better aggressive. Apollo's is better defensive because you don't have to land on an opponent for Apollo's. But I think they fill the same niche overall. Chiron. I think Chiron is like B plus A. Think he definitely can fill a niche, but Fenrir is not going to be as powerful in duo. Athena's not good in duo. So he doesn't really need to have a cleanse in that role. And also, you just want your hunter doing as much damage as possible right now. That's why you see a lot of these AMCs, Onhers, Kurnanos. They also have to have a decent amount of team fight pressure. With double hunter, he might be a valuable mid laner, but I don't see him over like another ability-based hunter like AMC or something like that. But I might be wrong. Maybe we'll see a lot of these single target or like single CC'd Guardians come back like Ymir and Athena for some reason. And then Chiron's really good into them. But aside from that, I think he's just mediocre to subpar. Kronos. I think Kronos might be strong. Fafnir, if Double Hunter becomes a thing, Kronos, Sol, Freya, those characters also all become more prevalent. The thing with Kronos is that no matter how bad his early game is, his late game almost like always makes up for it. He has pretty much everything a mage hunter needs. He's got the tower pressure that hunters want. He's also got the ability damage that you want in a mage. He's super safe compared to like a lot of these other characters that are weak early game. And also he shreds tanks as well as carries alike. His 2 is really strong. He gets more power as the game goes on. He's always just like a taking time bomb, pun intended. Because it's like once you get to that point where he's late game and unkillable because of his ultimate, it's just super hard to win. Next is Kukulin. I think Kukulin has the benefit of having like, what, 7 abilities? 8 abilities, whatever the number is. I think it's 7 because you can trans and detrans. He's like a way budget Arthur. Like you can do a lot of damage, get a lot of pressure, but not nearly as well as Arthur can. He still has that boxing potential because all of his abilities do damage. All of them proc Glad Shield. That's a super strong item. His synergy with Glad Shield is probably the best in the game. So that's probably like, that's pretty important. His Totem Aku pressure is good. His team fight is mediocre. Really going to rely on his ultimate a bit too much. But I think that his early game pressure and just overall usage of Glad Shield might make him just A tier. Cupid! I think Cupid is like a niche ability-based hunter that doesn't even do damage ability-wise, which is really weird. Like he's definitely like quote-unquote an ability-based hunter because he doesn't have like a stim or whatever. Him and Chiron are both utility hunters, so I think they fall in relatively the same area. Cupid only has 1 damaging ability outside of his ultimate. His ultimate is hard countered by sprint and beads, which is kind of rough. Outside of that, it's really just a mez. It's kind of mediocre all around. I think the cripple is the most important thing, but many of these high-end gods aren't like don't have 2 dashes or whatever. So Cupid's not really all that viable. He does have a good matchup in the Shiva though. So maybe we'll see a rise of him, but I doubt it. Next is Dodgy. Dodgy has been looking really strong because of how many top picks don't have CC immunity. If you look at just these 2 rows, this one, Ao Kuang and Dependent has to have a god nearby. Bacchus, Cernanos, Amazenkob, Pwash, Ardio. None of these characters have CC immunity in their ultimates, and those that do either don't want to use their ultimates to escape a dodgy pull, or if they do, then you're probably in a better position. Like, dodgy ult is super strong because it can force ultimates, and it can also force beads. The biggest thing is that like characters like Ao Kuang or Achilles, they don't really want to use their ultimate as like a getaway tool. More than likely they want to use it to execute. With Cerberus and Bellona, they want to use their ultimates to initiate in a fight, right? So forcing those ultimates with dodgy ult is really strong. Like her ult is super good at either setting up or forcing something else to happen. And I think that's why dodgy is really strong. Her biggest drawback keeping her out of S is that her early game is pretty abysmal. One of the worst assassins when it comes to clearing camps. But since invades are going to be less prevalent, I think she's going to be a little bit stronger in the future. Next is Disco. Disco is, I think, a B plus A character. She has that damage that other mages have. Maybe not as much, but her CC is nice. Her ultimate's really good at disrupting a team fight. Her Cloud allowing her to reset cooldowns is really strong. And her passive allows Duo to get pressure early. The biggest drawback is that she's just like worse than Agni in most senses, or Hera. Like, you'd just rather have a Hera or a Agni in pretty much any game, but she's still not a bad pick in my opinion. Next is Erlong. Erlong kind of suffers from like being able to play in a lot of roles, but none of them like all too effectively. Like, he can flex, and I think that's the biggest reason that you see him. Like, he can flex in like 3 roles, but support he kind of doesn't do enough anymore, especially with pressure being less valuable in the future most likely. In jungle, he does get a lot of that damage, but in the jungle right now, it's really weird because Erlong kind of does decently well, but he has to get relatively he has to commit a lot of abilities in order to do what he wants to do. Like, he has to commit his dash, which is really risky for a jungler, because you want to blink in, drop your kit, and get out, or you want to blink in, shred them down, and get out. Erlong also does get countered by anti-heal quite a lot. The biggest thing with Erlong in the jungle is that CC is his bane, because he has no CC immunity, and I think that's pretty important in jungle right now. Like, having the ultimate that gives you CC immunity is really strong, especially when you look at all these supports that just peel for their carries like that. So Erlong lacking CC immunity in jungle is bad. In solo, he might be alright. Like, I don't see him ever being picked over Bellona, because Bellona just gets more pressure, but I think he still has a presence in that role. But the triple flex is definitely the main reason you'd pick him. I think Fafnir is going to be quite strong. He might even be A+, if Double Hunter becomes a thing, which I think it might. Fafnir's Chorus is the main reason for that. Just boosting attack speed by 35% is scary enough. The reason that he might still be strong is because right now you can run like these auto attack assassins like the Baka, like the Arachne, Kali even, and they all do well with the Chorus buff just as much as like a Hunter would. So he might even be A+. The biggest issue is that his early game is weaker, but next patch it is getting better. Next patch he is getting a better early game, because early game's not going to mean as much. So I think we'll see a lot. We won't see a lot more Fafnir, but we'll see more Fafnir in the future. I think Fenrir, I think the changes will make him better. Not in the support. It's gonna gut his support capabilities, but I think overall the changes will make him a better flex pick, because now you can flex him in solo and jungle. I think right now if you pick Fenrir, you're pretty much strictly picking him for support. Jungle Fenrir is not as effective as support Fenrir, neither is solo Fenrir, but I think now solo and jungle Fenrir have a lot more viability. I think the reduction of cooldown on his leap is going to hurt his support a lot, because he's not going to be able to leap every 8 seconds. It's going to be every 12 seconds if he hits it. That's 4 more seconds that the duo can recuperate, prepare for a counterattack or whatever, which is pretty big. It also just means he's doing less damage. Like in a 30-second time frame, he's only hitting you like 12, like 2.5 times instead of 3, because 8 seconds. Like, that's pretty big, I think. Like, he can hit you almost 4 times with his current leap in a 30-second time frame. In the future, he's gonna only hit you like 2 to 3 in a 30-second time frame. So that's definitely a lot of damage reduced early game. Furthermore, pressure and duo, as I said time and time again, is going to be less important. But the thing is, his Brutalize is now going to have an AoE, so in the jungle you can get that level 1, and I think that has a shorter cooldown, not sure. So your jungle clear is going to be better. The reason he might not be as good in jungle as in solo is because he can't build tanky in the jungle, right? You have to have a little bit more damage in the jungle in order to do your role. But outside of that, I think he's definitely going to be better than... or he's going to be about the same, if not better, than where he currently is. Freya definitely did get nerfed quite hard, I think. A lot of damage nerfs came through, as well as some slow CC nerfs. Her slow definitely get hit a bit. The damage on her 1 and her 2 got heavily decreased, so early game it's going to do way less. She's going to rely on her scalings more, so she has to get to that late game point in order to be super effective. I think that she still is like the best auto-tech mage out of any of them, but she does lack that tower push already. So you might need to build double hunter around Freya in order to be truly effective, or like a auto attack assassin, because I think that her tower push is just that bad. Next is Ganesh. The Ganesh is going to become even better because of wave pressure not being as important. His ultimate is definitely just like really good. His 1 and his 3 kind of like mediocre to subpar, but his ult and his 2 just make him super strong. His 2 gives him a lot of disruption for like how short the cooldown is, like 8 seconds, with 20% CDR. His ult is really strong for how short cooldown it is, 75 seconds for an ultimate that can provide area denial, that can provide damage, that can provide setup, that can provide objective secure, objective pressure. It just has a lot of effects to it that make it really good. I think that he might be a sleeper pick right now. Next is Geb. I think Geb is like obviously solid. So get it because he's a rock. He's got the shield, and the shield makes him good. I don't know what else I need to say about him. I guess a 2-second stun on his ultimate's also really good. Knock up on his 2 is also really good. Biggest issue is pressure, which is going to be relatively negated next patch. So all around, I think he's going to be A. He might even be S. We'll have to see how the thing shakes out. Next is Guan Yu. I think Guan Yu is a sleeper solo laner of the season. Definitely has one of the best team fights out of any of the solo laners currently, while also being a warrior. I think that Guan Yu has a really good ultimate. He's the only healer to have mobility in his kit. His totem secure, which is like really important for a character that uses a lot of mana like Guan Yu, is really good. His boxing isn't even all that bad. Warrior's Blessing plus Glad Shield is strong, especially for Guan Yu. We'll have to see if I'm correct on this prediction, but I think Guan Yu is going to be picked up a lot. Next is Hachiman. Hachiman is also like pretty solid because he's just so safe. He can get farmed up for late game. He's super versatile with his builds. He can build pretty much anything and be successful. Right now, except for Runeforge, he doesn't really do much at all with that item. But outside of that, he can build pretty much anything. Ikavol's going to be stronger. Hachi's ult is good for escaping, good for initiating, good for chasing down. Just a versatile character that has just like solid escape. Pretty good hunter overall. Hades. I think Hades is like, you know, bad. Like, why would you ever pick Hades, you know? Like, I don't see a real reason to do it. I think that he just gets shut down quite hard. Like, honestly, I don't know. The character is like, just sits still in his ultimate, and I just don't like that. Plus the fact that like you have to be really close for you to do any damage. Like you have to be really close for your 3 to hit opponents, and you have to be fairly close for your ult to hit opponents. And as a mage, that's not really good. You're gonna be picking them in solo then, and at that point, why not just pick like a warrior in solo or something to just do more? I feel like Hades just doesn't do as much as other solo laners currently. He might though. I'm not very familiar with solo. I just think that compared to other solo laners, he's just not as good. Next is Hobwa. Hobwa is pretty sicko. I don't know what's up with this character. He's like maybe a jungler, maybe a mid laner. He just does a lot of damage, that's for sure. I just don't think he's like good enough to be an A. I might be wrong on that, but I just don't think he has enough like anything really to be put in A. Like he feels like a super pub stompy character where either you win super hard or you lose super hard with the character. He's super inconsistent in that sense. Because of that, I feel like he can only be put in B+. If these auto attack assassins like Arachne and Bakasur become more popular though, he could definitely move up because their only forms of CC are slows, and Carpet is really good against slows, so we'll see in the future. Hell is the next god on the list. Hell is like and pretty much worse Aphrodite. I would be tempted to put her in C tier if I felt like her cleanse wasn't good, but her cleanse is good enough to put her in B, I think. Outside of the cleanse and the heals, I think she's just like a mediocre to subpar character that you can't really put in any role and be effective with. So I think she's just going to be in B tier for now. Next is Hera, your queen. Hera is definitely super strong. Definitely top 5 mages for sure. Does a lot of damage. Has a lot of self-peel actually with her shield and Argus. And is just able to just poke out opponents. She's just a nuisance on the field. Yeah, she's just super strong. Her only real weakness is her early game and her lack of mobility. But like I said before, self-peel happens, and early game isn't too big of an issue for mages right now because most of the mages that are good are actually like pretty late game focused. So Hercules is actually pretty nice right now, I think. The character can box super hard because of his passive and heal. He has a lot of CC with his pull push, and his boulder recently just got a buff so that it does more damage. He has more kill potential. I think those all combine to make him a really strong character. Biggest drawback is that anti-heal is pretty strong as well. I don't think it completely makes the character unviable. I think he's still like A+. I just think that it weakens him and stops him from going to S. Next is Hou Yi. Hou Yi is like A+, I think. I'm pretty sure this character just like has the AoE damage with his ultimate, and if you're a good Hou Yi player, he has a lot of damage in his 1. I think Hou Yi is one of those few characters that like as you get really good with the character, he becomes so much better. Like he exponentially increases in viability. Like characters like Bacchus, Ao Kuang, Cern, you can be good, and the better you are at the character, it's cool, I guess, because you just are better at the character. But it's not like impossible to be that good at Cern. Like it's a linear function. Once you become like the best Cern player in the world, like you've reached a point. Hou Yi is just so much better. Like Hou Yi can be the best hunter in the game if you have like a good player on Hou Yi. Like his skill ceiling is so much higher. And because of that, I think he definitely has like room to grow. He's got a lot of optimization you can be doing because of it. The other issue though with a character that requires a lot of skill is that in like a tournament play, you might not want that because that's a little bit more pressure than like say a Cern, Rom, Jingwei, but he just has enough like basics to make him an A+ character. I think Hunmats is a sleeper pick of this season. I think that with this change where he gets double damage early game for his clear, he's going to be a lot stronger. The monkey bouncing twice to the big camp or whatever is going to be pretty important, I think. I think that's really going to make it a lot better when it comes to clearing, because it's literally going to double his clear speed. I don't think they said anything in the patch notes where it's like reduced damage on the bounce back. So if it's bouncing all 4 times every time, that means you're going to hit the speed buff or whatever with, I think, 80 damage with your 3 twice, which is 160 damage, which is really good for early game clear. An ability that clears so early. And that's his biggest issue, is that his early game is lackluster compared to like a Pele or a rat or something, he doesn't have nearly as much early game. But if that's what's it called, fixed up, then he becomes really strong because his late game is probably one of the best, if not the best late games for any assassin in the game. He fills a similar niche to Daji, but I think with this change, he might be better than Daji. Next is Isis. I'll put Izanami at the same place because they both have this issue where it's like past level 1, they're kind of useless. Isis, it applies to less than Izanami. Izanami past level 1 really doesn't do much. Without her 1 active, her boxing is really not that great. She has to get a lead early on, otherwise she doesn't do much. And AMC just does what she does, but better. With Isis, she can get the level 1-2 because of her stun ball combined with the wing gust, but her teamfight capability outside of her ultimate is pretty mediocre. Her 1 doesn't go that far for a mage ability, and her 2 isn't that easiest thing to hit in the world. So compared to like an Agni or a Harrow that can just poke you out from a safe distance, Isis has to get fairly close and personal in order to do most of her damage, and her ultimate's going to be better on the defensive side than the offensive, we'll just put it that way. Next is Giannis. One of the 2 Season 2 mages that is really strong right now. I think he's one of the better mages. I think he could be like the second best mage in the game. I feel like Giannis right now just has so much going for him. Like, even if he doesn't do as much damage as an Agni or a Hera, he also has the ability to move people around so well, specifically his team. Like, if you have a Giannis on your team, you almost always have positional advantage as a team with the Giannis, because you can portal around, because you can move from one side of the map to the other. You're always going to be an omnipresent threat with Giannis as a team, not just as an individual, which is why that makes Giannis ult so like strong, is because he not only is he omnipresent, but so is his jungler, so is his solo laner, his support. These characters can all rotate over to a side of the map super quickly, and not to mention that he still has a good amount of damage. It's just like, if you have a Cerberus or Bacchus to balance out his slight lacking of damage compared to other mages, he's probably one of the best mages in the game. It's just that you have to probably balance out the lack of damage there with a little bit more damage in support or elsewhere. But outside of that, he just has a lot of utility. He has so much utility that you can't really ignore him. And yeah, that's why he's an S. Jingwei is a strong hunter. She can pretty much get out of almost any situation. I feel as though Jingwei just like kind of never dies in laning phase, really, because you can gank her as a jungler. She just knocks herself up, knocks you up while you're diving her, and dashes away. You can chase her down, and then she ults away. And if she doesn't, she can expend beads, and then at that point, I guess she's a little bit weaker to ganks. But she rarely needs to use all 3 of those. Usually it can just be a beat dash away. Sometimes it has to be a ult away, right? But she still has those tools where she can just get out of situations really easily, and she can always come back to the lane super safely with her passive. So it's super hard to punish a Jingwei, which allows her to just farm up for the late game. The only drawback, I guess, in this meta is that she doesn't do as well with the attack speed build as with the crit build, but that doesn't really matter too much. Like, she just still has tools for farming, and that just makes her super strong. Next is Jormungandr. He's obviously a new character, but I'm gonna just rank him as A for now. He's average, I think. I think he's got the flex to solo and support. He's definitely a better solo laner. Does a lot of damage actually with his like 2. His 2 does a shit ton of damage. His ult is really good because it's untargetable and just makes it so that he can like attack people from anywhere, which is always just like a strong capability as a solo laner. The biggest thing is that his passive makes him immune to a lot of like knock-up ults, which are pretty strong right now, like Dodgy ult, Herc pull push, I guess. It's not an ultimate, but Serb ult, that's a big one. Fenrir, all those characters he kind of just negates completely because of his passive, which is really good. Next up on the list is Kali. I think Kali is like A+. I'll put her in A because I feel like she's got the flaw where she has no CC immunity in her kit, and her early game isn't like that that good. It's not awful by any means, but it's not the best. When she does come online, it's really hard to beat Akali, I think. I just feel like Bakasur does it slightly better, even after these nerfs, because he still has that CC immunity. Akali does have more ability damage, so we might see more of her. This might be the best. Like, if Akali's going to be good, it's during this meta. So, we'll just have to wait and see if she's actually, like, as good as some people say she is. I still think she's, like, an A tier god at most. Next is Khepri. I think Khepri's pretty strong. Just the capability of making it so that any form of, like, hard commitment onto a player is relatively negated is super strong. Like, he's got the emergency Geb shield kind of thing, where it's like they're about to dodge any ult. Giannis ult, who he ults my, I don't fucking know, Agni or AMC, right? Like, Khepri can just completely negate that from happening, which is really strong. His capability of just, like, allowing him or his soul laner or just anything to bait things out, make a hard commit go south pretty much is what he can do. And it makes it a lot, trickier for the team playing against the Khepri to initiate, because they have to prioritize targets correctly and make sure that Khepri can't cast his ultimate, which is the biggest weakness of Khepri, is that if he doesn't get his ultimate off, he becomes far less useful. So any form of, like, CC to stop him from doing so is pretty important. Next on the list is Arthur. Arthur is fucking stupid, bro. Character is broken. Glad Shield works really well on him. The only bad thing about him is he's kind of bad against cripple characters like RDO. But luckily, RDO is really the only character that can, like, hard counter him. If you ban the RDO, you can get the Arthur every time and really just wreck house. He has really no bad matchup besides RDO, and most other matchups are favorable for him. He pretty much always gets pressure in solo, which means he's always coming out of that lane somewhat fed, and which makes him even harder to kill for, like, a mid laner or an ADC. He's also super mobile, has a lot of damage. In fact, he has true damage, which makes him even more annoying. His ultimate is on such a short cooldown, and he has either a 2-second stun or a Neja-esque ultimate that does true damage. I think I've already mentioned Glad Shield. He just has a lot. He can just always have an ability going because of how CDR synergizes so well with him. And I think that's why he's one of the best characters in the game. Cuckoo. Cuckoo is similar to Opwash, except a little bit worse because his overcard setup. I think they both, like, kind of do the same thing, where it's just like you have an ability for area denial. Opwash has more, though. Opwash has way more area denial. You have some, like, poke abilities. Opwash has 3, and then Cuckoo's 1. And you have a lot of burst with Opwash's Corpse Explosion and Cuckoo's ultimate. I think the biggest thing is that Cuckoo's ultimate requires setup, and Opwash's kit really doesn't require all that much setup. I think that's the biggest reason why you wouldn't pick Cuckoo over Opwash, even though I think Cuckoo is slightly safer. It's because Opwash just has more area control with his ultimate, and there's really no reason to pick Cuckoo over him. Next is Kumba. I think Kumba is really sick right now. He has really good matchups into some of the best supports in the game. Gab, he has got a pretty good matchup into early on. Bacchus, he has a really good matchup into. RDO, he has a pretty decent matchup into. Characters like Sylvanas, he has good matchups into. He just has really good matchups overall. He doesn't really have a weakness. It's just that his ultimate compared to, like, a Sylvanas or Gab ult isn't as impactful. Yeah, it banishes one player, but it's not, like, completely stopping a team fight, or, like, completely stopping 3 to 4 players on an enemy team. It's more just, like, getting rid of one player for a bit, you know? So the ultimate isn't awful, but it's not, like, the best. It definitely falls off late game where you're looking to just CC multiple opponents at the same time. But it's still strong. I think Kumba as a character is also strong because of how prevalent 2/3 of the execute characters are as well. Kuzembo, on the same tier as Kumba, for a different reason though, because if Double Hunter becomes prevalent, Kuzembo is definitely the best answer to it. Even without Double Hunter, he's just strong because of the way he works. He provides so much disruption from the solo lane. He provides a decent amount of setup with his Sumo Slam. If you coordinate that well, his Thorns plus his Shell Spikes plus Nemean makes it so that Hunters can't really do much if he walks at them. he's pretty strong. He can flex into support, although not as well as his solo. I think his solo is definitely better, and it's just like really strong. Next is Loki. Loki's just bad, like really bad. Don't pick him. Next is Medusa. Medusa feels a similar niche as on her, but does it worse. I think, like way worse. I don't know what, like she's mediocre. She's mediocre to subpar, but that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all she has going for her. There's really no reason to pick her. Next is Merc. I think I'll put Merc in A+. He has a lot of CC, has a good amount of mobility. He's got slow immunity in his 2. So he can box and just zip around the map really well. I think that's the biggest thing, is that his ability to just set up ganks and just farm at the same time is really strong. That's like the biggest thing with Merc. Next is Merlin. Merlin is just absurd right now. Does as much damage as Anubis ult with his fire stance. Has as much control and poke as like a Poseidon in his ice stance. Gem of Isolation in general is just stupid on the character. He's able to control. He's able to like peel for himself with his combat blink and his arcane knock up on his ultimate. So he's got a lot of tools on him. I think the biggest thing is his early game is subpar, and he really has only one form of hard CC on his arcane stance. But aside from that, he just is a super strong character. Neith, I think Neith has a global, so she can't be below like B+, I'd say. Neith, I feel like she has some good synergies with like characters like Ao Kuang, Giannis, and stuff. She does have the ability to flex into mid and ADC. 2-second root is strong. The biggest thing is just like she's super unsafe because she doesn't have CC immunity. She has like no mobility outside of her leap, which is a super slow, super telegraphed leap, and you can't even use it aggressively like on her because it has really no perks aggressively. So I feel like Neith can be picked. She needs a team comp around her. There has to be a specific reason to pick the Neith. It most likely has something to do with the ultimate, and I feel like there's just better globals, at least from mid lane and in the dual lane currently. Next is Nemesis. Nemesis is god-awful. I don't know. This character might even be B tier, but I'll put her in B+ because she has the ultimate. Her kit outside of her ultimate's just bad, and her ultimate's like just Sunder, so you can probably get away with like putting Sunder on your support if you want that effect and everything else, and just like get a different character in the jungle, because Nemesis is just not good. I think that like her 1 is pretty useless, her 2 is pretty useless. Her 3 is I8 if they don't have a lot of CC, otherwise it's pretty useless. So, character's bad. She has no CC immunity. Bad character. Her early game's even worse than like Dodgy. Next is Neja. Neja got nerfed pretty hard. I think he's only gonna be A tier after the nerfs. 120 damage lost on the ultimate is pretty big, especially when you consider that Neja is mostly being played in support, where base damage is the most important. This means that like when the enemy tank or whatever that you're ulting lands, he's gonna have 120 more HP, which means that your raw ult or like your Giannis ult or whatever you're setting up for, your late game mage ult, has to hit for harder earlier, which is rare, right? Your raw ult is not going to hit for 120 extra damage early on. Maybe later on that won't be a big deal. And I think later on Neja is not going to be impacted by this change all that much. I think that Neja is still going to serve the purpose that she does currently in the late game. But early on, I think where he's supposed to be the best, it's going to hurt him a lot. And I think that'll bring down his viability from like S, A+, to like down to A. Next is Nike. I think Nike's a pretty A tier character. She has the Laurels, which are pretty strong. Her ultimate's really good for just soaking up damage. Her 1 is like it's good clear. It's pretty hard to interrupt for most solo laners because most of them don't have like a stun on them except for like Achilles. So pretty uninterruptible clear. Nike's leap is like a Bacchus flop if you can hit it, so it's not bad. Yeah, she's pretty strong. Nox, I think Nox is really strong in support right now. Her capability to not only set up for her allies but peel for her allies is really good. She can drop the silence on any of her carries, and it becomes a lot harder for an assassin or whoever's diving to really finish the kill off because how strong the silence is. Her ultimate can be cast twice in a longer team fight, because of how short the cooldown is, and she just has a lot of setup as well as a lot of CC, which makes her strong. The only issue is that her early game is really weak, but I think it's worth it for this character at least. Next is Nuwa. I think Nuwa is underrated a little bit. She has a lot of self peel as well as like a lot of damage late game. Like her burst damage is insane with clay soldiers plus shining metal. She always has that global ultimate that can hit everyone with pretty much ease. Like it's pretty much impossible. It actually is impossible to miss new ult, which is nice. Early game it does like nothing though, so it's a mid to late game poke tool or tool to like finish them off, which is not even a bad thing to have. It's also a good escape tool. It's actually really hard to dive a Nuwa as an assassin because she drops her clay soldiers, stuns you, then drops her fog, and then if she has to, she can ult out. Then she can burn relics. It's like really hard to hard commit onto her, and her level 1 isn't awful because of her root under passive. So if you box a Nuwa, it's hard to do that because she's gonna have a CC ability and can also always combo with her 8-second shining metal. So I think she's a little underrated, but we shall see. Next is Odin. I think Odin is B+. His cage nerfs really hurt him a lot, and cage is becoming less and less effective as the time goes on. More and more players know how to counter it. More and more players just build Phantom. So past level 12, he becomes super useless, which isn't that good because at least beads can be burnt by something else. Phantom being burned for Odin cage is literally the purpose that it's being burned for. Osiris, I think is A. I think he's like slightly better than Chalk in his job, at his like Chalk job late game. Early game, I think Osiris and Chalk are relatively the same. In a 1v1, of course, Chalk wins, but overall, I think they're relatively the same character. In the laning phase, both are pretty much bullies that try to poke at the opponent. I think because of Warrior's Blessing being better, Osiris is just like a little bit better. He's got good boxing overall. His 3 is still a nice ability. He gets a lot of mitigation, so it's hard to kill him. He does well against true damage and stuff, so there's that going for him. He's got a good matchup into Baka, I guess. The biggest thing I think is just that he's slightly better than Chalk. Next is Pele. I think Pele is also an A tier character. She's getting nerfed again, so her early game is going to be a little bit worse. Her late game is going to stay relatively the same, so overall the character's like early game like stomping potential has gotten down. I think she fills like a similar niche to Thanatos but better, where like you try to get the early snowball going and just run the game from there, and if you don't really do that, you don't really do much as the character. She still does have the AoE knockup, which is super strong, but aside from that, I don't think that she's like the most priority jungler right now. Next is Poseidon. I think Poseidon's aight. The cripple, gem plus cripple is really strong as always. A lot of control, area denial like I said. I think area denial is pretty useful on mages right now. So you might be higher up on the tier list. The only issue is that if you get hard committed, it's really hard to do much about it. Because you have to drop your Kraken. And if that, like it's a relatively slow ability, so if the assassin jukes it out or whatever, it's going to be really rough for you because then you drop Whirlpool. But that won't stop much of the damage. So it's really just Kraken. Yeah, so Poseidon's aight. He's got movement speed. He doesn't have any CC immunity though, so Next up is Ra, excuse me. Got coughed. I think Ra's like A+A. I think he's A+ just because of his healing. Most of the anti-heal characters like Odin, like the not Discordia, Surcat, like the Osiris aren't the best characters in the game right now, so I think he can play the Ra and get away with it. He has that ultimate, he has the long range artillery fire. His team fighting is nice with his heals as well as his sieging and counter sieging. Just all around a pretty solid character. The only issue is he does require setup, but unlike Cuckoo, who needs setup for his ultimate, Ra has enough CDR that he doesn't necessarily need setup for each ultimate he fires, just for the ones that are like required to get a kill, because he can just fire them off and 30 seconds later he'll have it up again. Next is Raijin. I think Raijin is the best mage from ahead. Out of any of the mages on this list, if Raijin gets a lead, he's almost unstoppable. I think that maybe Merlin can contest him, but besides that, Raijin with the lead is nuts. The character from behind, however, becomes a little bit more Risky to use just because of how his ult works and keeps him sitting there. The thing with Raijin is if he's ahead, anyone who tries to kill him while he's ulting just dies before he dies. The thing from him being behind is that he dies before they die with his ultimate. So it's one of those things where he has some bad matchups if he gets behind. As long as he stays ahead, though, he's honestly one of the best mages in the game. So just if you pick the Raijin, prioritize getting him ahead and keeping him there. Rom is always going to be the staple hunter. Nice auto attacks, good ultimate overall. In general, good boxing. Doesn't really, pretty safe. Standard hunter. I think he's like the staple hunter, like I said. So there's really no flaws to him. It's just that, he can rarely be above A+ because he's always going to be like the staple hunter. He's never going to have like some certain broken aspect to him. Next is Ratatosker, who's probably one of the best, if not the best jungler in the game. Him and Robin are close. I'll put Robin with Rat, actually, because they're like the two of the best junglers in the game currently, outside of like Alquang, Baka, right? These characters are really strong when it comes to diving opponents. Like, they're the two best divers in the game, and that's for slightly different reasons. Rat is because he has global dive pressure. He can dive from almost anywhere from the map. Like, he can gank duo from like mid Gold Fury. He can be almost anywhere with a semi-global presence, which just makes him scary, especially earlier on. Robin is scary for a different reason. The reason is, like, when Robin dives your carry and your support, you try to CC the Robin, he has his 2-up, right? And if he has Magi's, it's even harder. And then if he has beads, it's even harder. Because Robin is just really good at diving. He gets mitigations from his ultimate, so he dives, takes less damage, and then he immunes any counter initiation that you try to do on him, whether it be CC or just damage from like your mage dropping their kit on him. And then he blows your mage up, which is really scary. The character is really nuts. I don't know which one's better. I think Robin might be better, but Rat's global pressure might give him the edge in that sense. Both these characters are just really strong. Next is Scylla. I think Scylla's late game is good. I just feel like her early game is just so bad you can't make up for it. I feel like doing a lot of damage isn't exclusively Scylla's thing anymore. Like, she's not the mage that you think, oh, when you think of late game damage mages, Scylla's the only one that comes to mind. At this point, like, Agni does a good amount of damage late game. Raijin does decent amounts of damage late game. Merlin comes to mind. Even characters like Cuckoo or something like that. Morgan, stuff like that. They do about... Like, Scylla obviously does more damage than them, but, like, it's probably not worth giving up so much early game to do slightly more damage than your opponents. Next is Saket. Saket is A. She's solid. I don't think she's anything more than that. She's not exceptional because she doesn't have like any one thing that makes her broken anymore. It used to be her true damage and her capability to build tanky because of it, but they nerfed that a while ago. Her CC is strong, but it's not like stronger than like a Hunbat's ult or a dodgy ult. Her damage is strong, but not stronger than a Rat or Robin. Her dive, same deal as Rat and Robin. Her late game is somewhat strong, but not stronger than like Baka or Merc. So I think she's just like pretty good, but she can't be like the best. Next is Scotty. Scotty's not pretty good. She's pretty bad. Lack of mobility is probably the big thing. Ultimate's mediocre. Her ice is strong, but that's about it when it comes to her kit. Aside from her ice, her kit is mediocre to subpar. She's an ability-based hunter, so that's cool. She could be played in mid. Maybe double hunter will make her more viable. We shall see, but I doubt it. Next is Sobek. I think Sobek is good right now. Pluck sets up for a lot of things. Tail Whip is a really good peel. His ult is just strong. His ult is actually really strong. He's got heal in his kit, so he can also flex in solo and support, although his solo right now isn't the best because Warrior's Blessing and pressuring out the enemy is pretty viable. Next is Soul. I think Soul is like pretty good. I think out of the if Fafnir becomes more meta, like I think he might, Kronos and Soul will both rise up. I think Soul definitely has better early game than like Kronos and Freya, and I think that's the biggest reason why you'd pick her over those two. Her objective secure is also the best out of the 3 ADC mages. She is relatively safe with her Disapparate, although once you're in that incorporeal form, if the opponent is just like sticking towards you, you're kind of just screwed. You don't have much else. But her boxing is nuts because of her passive, so I think she's a Wukong. I think Wukong is solid. I think Wukong is a pretty strong pick right now. He just doesn't lose lane. You always come out even or ahead. His team fight is decent. Like, he's just an all-around... He's like a ROM of this whole lane. Like, he works with the items right now. And I think that because of that, he just kind of is A+. Susano. Susano has a moving Sylvanas ult, which is strong because it's a knockup. And he also has a lot of mobility, can apply a lot of damage in a pretty large area, actually. His Storm Kata actually does decent amount of AoE damage. He's pretty good at diving and just, like, disrupting fights with his 2 and his ult. The biggest issue is if he does get locked down, he's kind of dead because he has no CC immunity. Next is Sylvanas. Sylvanas is strong right now. He might be S tier. I don't think so. I personally don't like him too much, but he has had really good results in SPL, and you can't really deny that the character itself is strong. Just the CC. He has 3 CC abilities. His pull puts people out of position. His root makes it easy to set up your pull and any other form of damage from like your raw mage or whatever. His ult is just super strong. An AoE knockup, probably as good, if not better than Geb ult. His heal is also really strong for combat. Like, in combat, healing is probably the best heal in the game because of how much protections it gives. Also, it now does double the heal on the first tick, so that's really strong. His lane sustain is really good. All in all, he has the one weakness of being immobile, and that's about it. Next is Terra. Terra is also a strong Guardian. I think that she has the potential to be good in solo. I think she's better in support right now, especially with the coming patch where supports don't need to be as pressure-focused, pressure-oriented. I think that Terra is going to be really strong then. Her CC is pretty nice, and she also has the best ultimate in the game, so, you know, a lot of good pros. I think Thanatos is a B+ character. Fills pretty much the same niche as, what's his name? Camazotz, except has an execute attached to it, so that's pretty much all I have to say. He has to get snowballing early, otherwise it doesn't really work out for him. Next is Morgan. Morgan is one of those characters that's just, like, really good right now. I think that Morgan is really saucy, can technically be flexed in the solo lane. I think that having the ability to transform into another one of these high-tier characters is just super strong, especially, like, say, double Rat, double Robin, double Geb, double Sylvanas, double Terra, double Shibalanke. All these characters that are really strong, and having another one of their strong ultimates, I think is really beneficial for your team. Along with the fact that mage builds are super flexible right now, so Morgan becomes even stronger. I think Thor is B. Wait, what happened? I think Thor is B+. Definitely has the capability of being I. Not too big of an issue overall. I think that the character, he's just way worse Rat, which is like the best way to put it. So I don't see him ever being picked up over Rat. If Rat is banned, I feel like you just go Robin. If Rat and Robin are both banned, I feel like they're just other junglers that you probably pick. Bakasur, maybe the Mercury for the global if you really want that. So, yeah, I don't really see people picking him up at all. But, you know, I might be wrong. Next on the list is Thoth. I think Thoth is pretty cool right now. I think he's definitely like an A tier character. Thoth definitely deserves the A tier slot. Has a lot of range damage and just kind of pokes people out a lot. You know, the usual stuff. His range damage is probably the biggest reason why. Like, he's super safe when it comes to damage that he can output. Which is probably why we'd put him in there. Oh, wait. Oh, shit. I forgot. Hell's up here. Whoa. That's definitely not the case. Hell should be down there. Alright. Yeah. Back on Thoth. Ult is really strong. You can rechannel it. He fills a similar niche as to Ra, except he lacks the utility that Ra has. So, I'm going to put him in a tier below. But aside from that, he's really solid, I think. Come late game, he's solid. His early game is a little lackluster, though. I want to put tier in B+. Really no reason to pick him over, like, Wukong or something. Just doesn't do as much. Gets shut down by Ardia too hard and stuff. Ullr's A. He gets pressure in mid and duo. depending on where he's placed. The capability of playing either of those roles quite well. Might put him in A+, but I think he's just like an A tier solid hunter. Falls off a bit late game compared to like an AMC or a Cernados, but still solid. I think Vomit is becoming weaker as the meta progresses, just because people are learning how to counter his ultimate, and the rest of his kit is mediocre. I think the best ability outside of his ultimate is his dash, which is knock up. So he's going to slowly lose his jungle viability, and he's going to slowly lose his solo viability as the meta progresses, because people are just going to learn how to play against him, as well as the fact that he's getting some nerfs, although they don't affect him too much. I think it's just that players are adapting fast enough to make sure that Vomit doesn't become too much of a nuisance. You still have to build some characters or a relic around him though, so he's still fairly strong. Vulcan's like similar to Cuckoo. They achieve very similar things actually. Both their ones are pokes. They have movement like speed, they just don't have like movement abilities to reposition that well, outside of like short range dash for Vulcan and just like a short speed boost for Cuckoo. They have some area denial, Vulcan with his turret, Cuckoo with his NATO, and they both require a setup for their ultimates. I think that they fill pretty much the same niche. I think that Vulcan might be a little bit better because he has some CC outside of his ultimate, whereas Cuckoo's only form of hard CC is his ultimate. But besides that, I think that they're both pretty strong. I think Vulcan's just a slightly bit stronger in the A tier. Next is Shibalanke. Shibalanke is definitely like really strong, probably the best hunter in the game. His ultimate is literally like bad game design. It causes so much chaos in a team fight, and like it's so much disruption that like as the team with the Shibalanke, it's super easy to win a fight. And the thing with Shibalanke ult is like, unlike Terra, Sylvanas, these other disruptive ults, you can just cast it from anywhere in the fight. Like you don't have to be next to the opponents to do it, which is probably his biggest like strength, is that he can cast it from duo lane and it'll have an effect in solo, and that's important because a hunter doesn't really rotate early on, right? And Shibalanke, being a late game hunter, works really well with his attack speed build. The ultimate is just like, I think that's all I'm going to talk about is his ultimate. It's just really strong. Next is Jingchen. Jingchen I think is A tier. If Double Hunter becomes a meta, he'll become higher. But up until that point, I think he's A. He's solid because he can be flexed into both solo and support. Yeah. Ymir is not solid. Ymir is actually pretty trash. His peel is pretty bad. He roots himself in 3/4 of his kit, so he's super easy to catch out. His wall is probably his best ability, but outside of his wall, I don't think his kit is all that great. His freeze is decent setup, but it's not that best peel because people can definitely just like juke it because of the fact that he roots himself in place, and if they're close enough, they can just kind of walk around him. Yeah, Ymir ult does damage, but he's going to be behind because he's in support, so he's not going to do as much as like a Bacchus ult from ahead, like a Bacchus solo ult. It still will do a lot of damage, but you have to sit there and charge it in order to reach its full potential. Next is Zeus and Zhang. They serve similar purposes. They have the big AoE damaging ultimates. I think that Zeus has more range damage, more safe damage, whereas Zhang is a little riskier, but he also has more survivability with his heal and his stun. Overall, I think they serve relatively the same thing. Zeus's damage is a little bit safer though, so he might be a little higher up, like you don't have to commit yourself to the setup, but I feel like Zhang might be better just because he has CC on himself, so he can self-peel a bit better. But aside from that, they serve relatively the same purpose. The reason they're not any higher is because of the lack of mobility and how easy it is to shut them down. But I think that right there is the full tier list. Those are my opinions on every one of the characters. Tell me what you guys think, if you agree, disagree, and whatnot.